Good evening, and welcome to New Foundation Unity. This is our fourth class in the series on an overview of the Bible, a metaphysical history. I've been told already by Mark that the streaming is working, but in case yours isn't, you may email mark@truthunity.net. I hope that we will have some callers tonight at around 8 o'clock, 816-301-6304. If you would like to ask questions or have comments, that would be your opportunity to call in. You may also email me afterwards. Yeah, you too.
Jerry has a question.
And so as we begin our time together, I invite you to close your eyes. And remember the opening words of Charles Fillmore's invocation. I am now in the presence of pure being, immersed in the Holy Spirit of life, love, and wisdom. And as we turn within to go into the silence, acknowledge the presence and power, that one presence and one power, that in fact erases all limitations and prepares, cleans the slate, as it were, for us to bring forth perfect manifestations in accord with spiritual law. And for a few moments in the silence, let us rest in that awareness of the one source that provides us with infinite opportunities for good in the silence. And now, as we begin to return our attention to this time and this place, we give thanks that we have free and open access to this source in every moment, the source of guidance, the source of abundance, the source of infinite good. And for an awareness of that truth that sets us free, we are so grateful, and we do give thanks in the name and through the power of the Christ that lives within us all. Amen. Well, I like to always review the steps of the journey just so we can see how far we've already come. A journey that begins with that simple question, or perhaps just a feeling that there could be more to life than what I'm presently experiencing, or perhaps a conscious question of, I wonder for what reason I am here on this earth. If that has occurred to you faintly or dramatically, that's God's desire waking up in you to say, open the door and let me express in and through you. We saw in the character of Abraham the call. We all receive a call. His was to start a country. He didn't question. We see the foundational faculty of faith functioning in Abraham. And as he moves through the various stages of that journey of faith, it is strengthened. And Isaac represents the product of strengthened faith and strength working together, where Abraham is willing to give up his joy, his one connection to the world. So the faculty of faith, one of our 4 foundational faculties. Joseph, also, we see the development of the faculty of imagination, which works together with faith, because faith is the perceiving power of the mind, linked with the power to form and shape substance. If we can't perceive the invisible presence, then how can we work with it? So when faith and imagination are linked together, that's the kind of active faith that is a step along the way. It's also important to notice the location in the body for these faculties. And the location of faith and imagination are both. Faith is located in the pineal gland, and imagination is located also in the right hemisphere of the brain. And each represents a disciple, of course. Peter is representing the power of faith, and imagination is represented by Bartholomew, or in the Gospel of John, he's called Nathaniel. All right. Then we come to Exodus. Moses represents an understanding of law in its outer form. That is enough of an understanding faith to get us up to the very edge of the promised land, where we can actually see it. We're aware of possibilities, but we have not yet entered it. We see Moses leading the people of Israel. There are so many incidents where people fall back, as we fall back. We understand the law, but we also fall back on human thinking when we meet new situations. Then, last time, we talked about Joshua and actually entering the promised land. What does it take to actually make the plunge to go into the promised land? It takes a willingness, first of all. It takes courage because there are going to be new experiences. It's an unknown experience. So it takes willingness and courage and good understanding. And Joshua has faith that is now supported by yet another faculty, which we call spiritual understanding. Joshua, it's like having your first experience in the silence. That's what crossing the Jordan is actually symbolically describing. We all have to move through the Jordan. What's the Jordan? It is, that doesn't have to be rhetorical. You can answer it if you want. The Jordan is that constant subconscious stream of thought. And when we enter the silence, we actually go beyond that and make contact with the source. And when we come out, we have had an experience of the promised land. We have a great awareness of possibilities that exist there. Joshua's purpose was to reveal to the people of Israel, that is our spiritual nature, the rich inheritance that awaits us in the promised land. So it was to let us know the kinds of possibilities that exist. Yes.
Can I ask a question? So you said that the Jordan is an experience of the promised land? Or
not the Jordan. The Jordan is what is in between us. It's a barrier to our good. So we have, just like the Red Sea, all right, it's the first big barrier to the promised land.
So what was about them? Remind me again, what did you say about them crossing the Jordan in meditation?
Okay.
First experience?
Now, so before you have a class in silent meditation, you have to be inspired by some possibilities that await you. All right? Moses. Okay. I can see that there are many possibilities that I have not experienced. But when you enter the silence, then those possibilities are revealed to you. And what is your inheritance? It's infinite divine ideas, already created, already prepared for you. That's our inheritance. And you come back feeling, what happened to Jericho? It fell easily, effortlessly. Why? Because it was led by the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant, representing that spark of divinity within us. Now, God doesn't live in a box, but it's a symbol for that divine of us. And whenever the Israelites were with that ark, it represented God's protection, God's guidance, all that God is. So that's what led the way through the Jordan, that constant stream of thought. Have you ever noticed in meditation that you close your eyes and a whole bunch of stuff comes up? That's crossing the Jordan. And if you have just a minute of contact there, or a second, a flash of contact with the source, a great deal of that promised land is now revealed to you. And it's a constant, ongoing revelation.
So I can't explain it, but when you associate in crossing the Jordan and the first experience of the promised land with meditation, then that made me think that, remember, before the Jordan parted and the priest were to pause right at the edge of the Jordan. So does that pause kind of?
Their feet were in the water, okay?
But just their feet.
Just their feet.
Just their feet.
Yes.
And then stop, right?
And they stopped. And the people had to keep a certain distance.
But what I'm saying, what I'm trying to understand, is that pausing right at just the foot depth of the Jordan a hint of the silence of the meditation that takes you into the promised land.
Well, I haven't intellectualized it to that point. It's just,
okay.
But I'll think about that.
Okay.
I'll think about that.
Just...
But the fact is that when they get to the other side, they have a purification ceremony. Isn't that what happens in meditation, that things get released? So that when they go up to Jericho, they don't confront Jericho head on. The priests are instructed to walk around. All right, 6 days they walk around with their trumpets. All right, creating an energy field of protection for themselves, so that when on the 7th day the trumpets are sounded and the shouts go up, we have that grand affirmation, and the walls simply crumble. The walls represent those crystallized, rigid beliefs. It was easy for Jericho to fall. Your first experience in meditation is easy. But is the work done? Hardly. So that's the first step. There's a whole lot of the promised land that has yet to be conquered. Okay, a whole lot. But Joshua got the people in, and then things still came up. Okay, Joshua had another purpose here, if you will. His job was not to completely conquer it, but his job was simply to reveal those possibilities that existed there. And what he had to deal with were the tribes fighting with one another. So when the land is divided up amongst the 12 tribes, which represents each faculty being allotted its proper sphere, Charles Fillmore likens it to heads of corporations. They're all like chief of their own territory. But this is actually the ideal division of land that does not take place until after David has actually conquered the promised land. Our faculties are at war with one another. The reason why the unifying the promised land was so difficult is that the faculties couldn't work together harmoniously. So think about it, how each faculty works. We have 12 of them, and they all have to be functioning from a place of spirit. But some of these faculties are working from the point of view of an outer directed. Do you see? Faith can be directed outwards or it can be directed inward. Are you putting your faith in the presence of God or the absence of God? And what about strength? What are you supporting? Are you persevering in some outer goal, or are you persevering in your spiritual development? Judgment, do you judge by appearances or do you judge righteous judgment? Okay, and you can go through love. Do you love everything, including cats and pizza and books and people, or do you find your identification and connection with the presence of God within you? And then power. Some people associate power out here, controlling people and territory. But true power, the source of power, is in the silence. Right? Each one of these faculties has a location in the body.
Are there faculties associated with the tribes?
Yes, they're all the immature. These are immature development of the faculties. The full development are associated with the disciples of Jesus.
So you could go through and read that Manasseh did not take possession, Ephraim, Zebulun did not drive out, Asher did not drive out, and see which faculties were weak at that point in time?
Well, you could. You actually could. Will and understanding, that's Matthew and Thomas. Okay, Matthew and Thomas in the New Testament, but they're tribes in the Old Testament. And so, are we willful or are we willing? Is our understanding the law of cause and effect, or is our understanding that there is one power and one presence, the ultimate cause, that brings about all good effects? Like that, know how each power functions, and then you will see that at least 2 or 3 have to be functioning in harmony in order for that spirit, awareness of spirit, to come forth into your life. Well, at this point, so the land is divvied up. The one tribe representing the faculty of love, which is Levi, they do not have a specific territory because love is the faculty that needs to be working with and through all, because love is the faculty that connects us to the source. Its physical correlate is gravity. It's like gravity is the connecting force in the physical world. All right. And but they have 48 cities that are allotted to them, meaning 4 cities in each of the 12 tribes allotments for a foundation, a spiritual foundation in every tribe. and then the cities of refuge. So, but this is an ideal. This does not actually exist. This fighting continues, tribes against tribes, and tribes against, Ammonites and Midianites and Amalekites and Canaanites and Philistines and all these which represent conditions in the mind that have to be overcome in order to keep ourselves in the promised land. It's one thing to enter the promised land, but to actually be established in the promised land, that takes another faculty, and we will get to that when we come to the United Kingdom, which is under David. Okay? So, all right, so here's the way it worked. At the beginning of Judges, we realize that this fighting has been going on and is continuing in a particular pattern. And it goes like this. The people did evil in the sight of the Lord. And that evil was called worshiping false gods. What is a false god? They called them Baals. Baal wasn't a bad guy. Baal was an agricultural god. All right? If we worship anything that is in form, that is a false god. If we worship a person, if we worship a situation, if we worship anything other than the one power and the one presence, that is a false god. It's a violation of the first commandment. Okay, so that's what happens. It starts with doing evil in the sight of the Lord. And then the Lord brings trouble and brings enemies to fight, that they have to fight. Then the people feel repentant, and they go back to their covenant, and then God delivers them. And then the whole thing is repeated. This is the pattern throughout. We saw it in the wilderness, in Exodus, and we're seeing it now in the promised land, that there are all these conditions of mind that keep coming up, blocking this wholeness, this unification of the tribes. So here's the way it worked. If trouble broke out, a judge would arise, and these judges were appointed, all right? A judge would arise to stop the trouble and represent the people. The judges represent the faculty of judgment, which happens to be one of the more difficult faculties that we have to deal with, because there's quite a range of influence that faculty has. It can be anything from spiritual judgment to, it can be everything from that to judgmental. You can judge righteous judgment, or in a human sense, you can be extremely judgmental. And that's quite a range. But the faculty of judgment, the whole book of Judges is really an exploration, and a fascinating exploration of judgment and how it changes according to which other faculty it works with. So there are 4 judges that you might consider having some value of good judgment, and every judge, not all 12, but every judge contributed something to the 12. The problem seems to be that no that the faculties as a whole, the tribes as a whole, none of them could put the benefit of the whole above their own personal interest. Sound familiar?
Say that again?
The reason there was disharmony is that none was able to put the interest of the whole above their own personal interest.
See, what I'm having trouble with is understanding how the faculties are fighting each other. It looks to me just more like the faculties aren't taking possession of the things that they should be taking possession of.
The faculties, okay, they're directed outward and they're directed inward. Now, if some are going outward and some are going inward, you're creating a conflict within you.
In that one faculty, which creates a problem for the whole.
In the whole, yes.
I mean,
all right, my faith in God is strong, but I persevere in following this Baal character out here. All right, that's a conflict. Do you see? My faith is strong, but my judgment, I judge by the appearances out here. That's a conflict. All right? If some faculties are functioning poorly and others are functioning strong, they're at war with one another. They all have to function in the same direction at the same time. Otherwise, that does not form a pathway for spiritual awareness to come through. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So, all right, where are we now? We've divided the promised land up, and we have judges in each one. And so we come to the first judge that I would like to mention, which is Deborah. She is the fourth judge. So count that 4 as important. She is an example, a beautiful example of how a judge should be. Deborah is already a judge. She's the only female judge. This is found in chapter 4. Okay, 4s are important, and she's the 4th judge. And this is verses 1 through 5, 31, 4:1 through 5:31. Her name means bee or wasp, which are known for very fine discrimination. Okay, now she is called upon as a judge to fight the Canaanites. What are the Canaanites? What condition in mind are the Canaanites that she is called upon to fight? This is.
Well, Canaanites, they're just human consciousness. They're not aware or awake of anything.
They exist in and for material things.
Right.
All right? Those are Canaanites. So what does she do? She receives guidance. First of all, you know that she is using spiritual judgment because she's sitting there meditating under her palm tree. Palm tree, that symbol of wholeness. The palm tree is a beautiful symbol of abundance. Every part of the palm tree is used to enrich life. And she's sitting there meditating under the palm tree. And she receives the guidance to invite Barak, who is a general, and he represents, Charles Fillmore calls it the fiery will. Will is the executive power of the mind. So she invites him to come, and she says, I will accompany you to battle. Now, when you prepare for battle, do you not think that good judgment is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So they go together, but she warns him. She says, you're going to win this battle, but you will not get the credit for it. Okay, isn't that interesting?
Why is that?
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that. That's the important part of it. So he goes out and he slaughters the Canaanites. Now listen to the instructions that he is given. The God of Israel commands you, gather your men out at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the tribe of Naphtali. And here's where you need to know your names. Naphtali represents the faculty of strength. 10,000 is that perfect number. And Zebulun, order. Okay? Here's two faculties, strength and order. And I will draw out Sisera, he's the general of the Canaanites, to meet you by the river Kishon, which is a fortified state in the subconscious. All right, so she's meeting, she's receiving the guidance in giving this to Barak, that he is to take 10,000 representing strength, 10,000 order, and she's going to meet, Sisera is going to be drawn to meet him by this river, which represents a fortified state in the subconscious. Fortified, a rigid belief in materiality, all right, in the subconscious. Now, it so happens that it's a laborious task for this army, even though Sisera had everything except for his men, and the chariot wheels got stuck in the rain and in the mud. And she says, and I will give him into your hand. This is God speaking through Deborah. Okay, you read the story, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she says, now there will be no glory for Barak, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. Okay, it's a woman, okay, a woman who drives the tent peg through his head.
So that wasn't a judgment against Barak, that was just what was going to happen.
It's that we don't take credit for our victories. God fights our battles. If we are in alignment with spiritual law, we don't take personal credit. It's spiritual judgment. Charles Fillmore says that it's that spiritual judgment that is credited with the victory. All right. Coming through Deborah. A very interesting story. So that's what happens. You see all the faculties that are involved here. So we have Deborah representing that very fine discrimination. She's working with will, okay, the will that makes the decisions, and it is the executive order. She's working with strength and divine order. Okay, you definitely want strength, but what is the source of strength? It's that strength to persevere. It strengthens our faith. That faculty of mind that perseveres and persists despite obstacles, and order, that things have to happen in a particular sequence to be effective. All right. So all these faculties come into play, but the primary ones are judgment and will. understanding, of course. And so that's, I mean, she was, there's a song of Deborah celebrating the victory. It's a totally different story, but oh well. It's an older version of the same story. Okay, next judge is Gideon. Gideon's a very interesting judge because this represents the joining of judgment with the power of elimination. Okay, judgment and release. Gideon, it reminds us a little bit of Moses when he is called. Gideon is called to fight the Midianites. This is a very difficult condition of mind because you can't pick them off one at a time. It means inner conflict, a disharmonious state of mind, inner strife, contention, and conflict.
Who's that?
Gideon. We are talking about Gideon is the judge who is called to fight the Midianites. Okay? And he asks for a sign. This is the guy who likes signs. He says he's addressed as a mighty man of valor, called to fight the Midianites, and he says, me? Oh no, not only is my tribe the weakest, okay, but I am the weakest man in my tribe. And he says, so I want a sign. And the Lord tells him, this is via an angel sitting under an oak tree. I mean, these are all symbols. And so the Lord tells him to go get food for a sacrifice. He brings the food out, places it on the rock, and the Lord, it is consumed with fire. So there's his sign. But here is the key to this story. He is told to smite the Midianites as one man. Now, his first impulse is to send messages out to all the other tribes and ask for help.
So, what's the reference for that? To strike as one man?
Well, it's in chapter 6. It's on your sheet.
Strike as one man. I don't see it.
Just 1 second here.
Oh, that's from the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. To strike as one man.
No, it's from the. I'll explain. Okay, it's chapter 6, 11 through chapter 8, 33.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through all the steps of the stories because I won't get to Samuel, which is what I really want to talk about. Okay, but here's what he does. He's small, his tribe is small, he's afraid, he sends out messages all over to gather, and he had 32,000 men in his army. And so the first thing the Lord tells him is, you gotta cut down your army. Send all the ones home who are afraid. Okay, that's the first thing. Fear is really the root cause. And then, this is a very odd request, but he is told, now take the rest of them, 22,000 went home. I mean, that's an amazing number. So now he says, divide the ones, you're going to take them down to the water and watch how they drink the water. And all the ones who lap the water like a dog, then put them in one group. And then if they kneel down to drink, apparently using their hand for a cup, then put those in the other group. And so he ended up with 300, the ones who lapped like a dog. Now, can you think of what the difference would be between lapping water and kneeling down by the river and scooping some water?
What?
Why would the ones lapping water be chosen rather than?
Let me look closer.
That's all right. You can think about it. I'm just
putting their hand to their mouth.
Uh-huh.
Because if you're putting your hand to your mouth, then your head is still up. So you can still see. You're not leaving yourself completely defenseless.
No.
If you're bringing the water to your head instead of your head to the water.
Remember that Gideon represents the faculty of release. Okay, so this is unifying judgment with the power of elimination.
I don't get it.
Okay. So lapping the water, it's a direct experience. All right, it's direct. Direct cleansing. All right, you're one with that power. Remember, water, like baptism, water represents cleansing. So if you're lapping the water directly rather than taking the water, scooping it out and drinking it, then you are becoming one with the power of cleansing, instead of taking an indirect route there and becoming one. So they were chosen. And what he does with the remaining 300 is important. He divides them into 3 companies, 100 in each company. And they all have, in one hand, they have a trumpet. In the other hand, they have a jar with a torch inside, and they surround the camp of the Midianites. And so it's a 3-pronged attack. This represents the 3 levels of our being: spirit, soul, and body. This is smiting as one man. Okay, and so, of course, he is successful. And what happens to the Midianites is that they are frightened, because here it's this smashing of jars, this light coming from all directions, and shouting in the name of the Lord and Gideon. All right? And what happens is evil destroys itself. They simply destroy themselves. So this is how the faculty with elimination works. You have an effect on mind, and spirit, soul, and body, all at the same time. Isn't that what we do in meditation, that affects all 3 levels of us at the same time? That's Gideon. His name means tree feller or cutter off. You take care of the tree at its roots. Jephthah is another judge, and he represents the faculty of judgment with a sense of perseverance, absolutely adhering, faith and strength together, that against all odds, he keeps his word, even to the point where he makes a vow that if he wins, he's going to sacrifice the first person that he sees afterwards, and that happens to be his daughter. Now, don't take it literally. His daughter represents his only connection to the world, so he has totally succeeded to free himself from all worldly connections. And the metaphysics is rich in all of them, and I truly wish we could cover all the stories, but we'll lose the purpose of the story of judgment. Samson represents strength. He had a special birth. He had a very good start in life, and so he represents that strength in executing spiritual judgment. However, he was called upon to conquer the Philistines. The Philistines, which are the strangers or foreigners. These are all foreign influences, like popular opinion. All of these things have an influence on us and tend to keep us off balance. That is what he was called to do. And the first mistake he made was to marry a Philistine woman. So he became one with what he wanted to destroy. Marriage, a union of two states of consciousness. All right, that's a dual state of consciousness. And he does he exhibits great strength, but in an outer way, he manages to kill a lion, and all the cleverness based on worldly thinking keeps him from enjoying the spiritual fruits of what he could be enjoying. And Delilah, of course, she keeps at him until he tells her the source of his strength. He puts her off as long as possible, and then finally says, hair. Hair is a symbol of vitality. And at birth, he was told that his head should never be shaved. He was a Nazarite. And so, of course, he is defeated. He's a failure in terms of his calling. And because of his lack of spiritual insight, he is blinded by the Philistines. And as soon as his hair grows back, his strength begins to come back. And so he and the temple everything goes down together. So we see these different movements of strength and how it betrays him in the end. And finally totally robbed of his strength by Delilah, who represents that sensual, the sensual desires that attracted him. And when the vital principle is taken away through indulgence of this kind, it weakens the body, and he finally perishes. So it shows the activity of strength working independent of divine law. Strength has to be established in substance, all right, in pure substance, and expressed in judgment before it will preserve in a constructive way. So that's kind of Samson in a nutshell. So we've seen this faculty interacting with the other faculties in various ways. And then we come to Samuel, who is not only a judge, but a prophet and a kingmaker. Samuel, meaning instructed of God, heard of God is the connecting link between these judges and the kingdom of the only unified kingdom that existed in Israelite history for less than 100 years, and that happened under David, the second king. So they had three kings: Saul, who represented that willfulness of the ego. He started out humbly, but as he went along, he deviated from his instructions. David, the faculty of love. Love unites. It's only love that can unite and work with all 12 faculties to bring about that state of unification in which love can be expressed in an outer way. So we have in his son Solomon, an understanding heart. We have that love and judgment functioning together as wisdom. Samuel, let's see, we're ready for questions. And I think the difficulty here is there are too many rich metaphysical symbols, and I'm having a hard time skipping over them. But the story of Samuel starts out, he is dedicated before birth to service of the Lord. And when he's 3 years old, he's taken to the temple where Eli is the priest. And he was born of Hannah, who had been barren, and so her vow was that she was going to dedicate him. And so while he was there in the temple, I think I'll read this part because it's really beautiful. This is how Samuel was called. At that time, I'm in 1 Samuel chapter 3, starting with verse 2. At that time, Eli, I'll start with verse 1 actually. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli, and the word of the Lord was rare in those days, because there was no frequent vision. Okay, no vision. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim, so that he could not see, was lying down in his own place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down within the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. All right, he is in that secret place of the Most High. Then the Lord called, Samuel, Samuel. And he said, Here I am, and ran to Eli. He thought it was Eli who was calling him. And Eli said, Here I am, for you called me. But he said, I did not call. Go lie down again. So he went and lay down, and the Lord called again, Samuel. And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. But he said, I did not call, and son, lie down again. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not been revealed to him. And the Lord called Samuel again, the third time, And he arose and went to Eli and said, Here I am, for you called me. Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant hears. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Okay, so Samuel is now called upon. Did you read the story? He's called upon to defeat the Amalekites. These are the warlike dwellers, the valley dwellers. Intense negative and adverse thoughts and emotions which are born of a limited human consciousness. So he's called the Amalekites, all right, to fight them. So when Samuel does lie down again and he hears the call again, oh, guess what the message is? You, Samuel, are to be the next judge of Israel and not those wayward sons of Eli. Now, would that not be a difficult message for a father to hear? But Eli understands. All right, so Samuel is now a judge. And so they are having this battle, and they lose the battle. Interestingly, they lose the battle. And the reason they lose the battle is that they remove the ark from Shiloh because they think that it's the ark that is going to make them win rather than in the sacred part of their own being. That's where the ark is, in that in the secret place of the Most High. So you don't remove the ark from its temple. It wasn't actually a temple in Shiloh, but it was a sort of, predecessor to one. It's where the ark was anyway. It's where it was lodged.
Do you think they kept the tent of sanctuary that Moses had made in the wilderness?
Yeah, it could be. It could be. Yeah. And so that's a lesson, that God doesn't exist outside, and God isn't out here, and you can't take this symbol of God out here with you and expect it to be the protection of God. So Samuel learned a lesson right there. Shiloh was considered a very safe place, and Charles Fillmore equates Shiloh with peace of mind and becoming conscious of the Christ presence. But Mizpah, which is where the battle fell apart, means being on guard against error. That's Charles Fillmore's interpretation. And so the people of Israel begin to demand a king. And their first king was Saul. Saul, who means demanded. The action of will in attaining that which it desires. So Saul represents personal will. All leaders, all kings, all priests, all characters representing authority, generals of any kind, represent the faculty of will. And will can be willful or it can be willing. Saul, even though he started out humbly, he became quite willful and disobeyed the guidance of Spirit. Let's see. He does not carry out God's commands. And it was prophesied that the kingdom would be taken away. Samuel directs him to wage war on these Amalekites. But Saul didn't do the complete job. He spared the king and kept the spoils and then denied it. That sounds a little bit like Achan, a little bit, the impatience, the disobedience, the lies, in the faculty of will, directed to its own way. It wants what it wants. And so it's willing to go against the commandments in order to get it. So, and for that reason, Saul does end up, he ends up dead by his own sword. And Samuel actually grieved over this his failure to rule righteously. And so he received guidance to go to Jesse, who was the father of David, and to choose one of his sons. And even there, Samuel, his first impulse is to choose the oldest son. And each one of the sons of Jesse came forth, and he said, no, 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 no. And then he said, is there not another son? And that, of course, turns out to be David. We don't have time to go into David tonight. It's after 8 o'clock, so I am ready for some questions and comments. And remember, this is a metaphysical overview of the phases of our own journey. And if you keep that in mind, it will keep you from getting bogged down in the details of the story. You have to know the story, though, in order to understand how the faculties are interacting with one another, and why Samuel succeeded in being the greatest of judges, became a prophet and the kingmaker, and then anyway, I'll stop. I'll pause there for the moment because I want to see what's unclear to you. I can tell that you're confused and not used to.
Yeah, I haven't done the personal homework to look up the names to even have a right to ask a question. But on that regard, but in chapter 19 and 20, where it's talking about Micah and his graven image and the Levite. And then the fact that in the area of the tribe of Benjamin, that poor concubine was, all the atrocity that happens there. And so the Benjamites, the tribe of Benjamin becomes accursed in the nations. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was interesting because I thought, wait a minute, wasn't Paul a Benjamite?
That
it is.
That's
interesting. It's in Philippians and it's in Ephesians.
Well, Benjamin, of course, representing the faculty of faith.
Well, but what the point I'm getting to is that Paul, as a descendant of a cursed tribe, becomes the apostle of the Gentiles who were accursed of the Jews. I just thought there was a poetic kind of a link there. All right. Between Paul the Benjamite and Paul the apostle to the Gentiles.
Yes.
That.
No, 816-301-6304. The line will be open for any callers. Any calls, questions, comments? I want everyone to be clear before we go on to the unified kingdom, of how there is this phase in our development where we have to get our faculties all working in the same direction together. That's the only way we can unify, and it's through the faculty of love, which we're going to talk about next time, the united kingdom. And then, once again, following the united kingdom, right away, the kingdom is divided, 924. Assyrians invade, 724. 586, Babylonians invade, and there's exile. And out of all of these kings, in both the northern part called Israel and the southern part called Judah, there are kings and prophets associated with these kings. There's hardly any good ones in the north. In fact, I think we can give them a 0. And in the Judah, there are maybe 2 or 3 that you could say contributed something positive. But it's like, in an outer way, a unified kingdom has, it's hard to keep things unified in an outer way. Have you ever seen a civilization that was a kingdom in an outer way for all time? But the kingdom in here can be unified, but it requires all 12 faculties, especially the 4 foundational ones: faith, strength, judgment, and love. And without those, you don't have a foundation. Excuse me. 816-301-6304. Mm-hmm.
When I reread the story about Gideon, I was impressed by the Lord's patience with Gideon's demands for signs, his continual fear.
Oh. Okay.
And I just wondered if you had any.
Hi, Kay. I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. I've really enjoyed this evening, and my only comment was, besides that, it was that's what you were looking for that strike the Midianites as one man.
Yes.
Gideon is in Judges 6, verse 16.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I knew it was in chapter 6, but I didn't have the verse handy. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Were you able to find the faculties that judgment worked together with? In any of the stories?
I understand what you're talking about. I've still got to go back and study it some more.
Right. Okay. I just wanted
But that makes perfect sense to me, that you've got to have, it's all the faculties working together, and you have conflict anytime
anytime they're not, and then these adverse conditions in mind keep coming back until they are all functioning together. So
at which point then we develop the Christ consciousness fully expressed.
That's right. So it takes persistence, it takes faith, it takes that connection to the source, which is love, and good judgment. So, well.
And for some of us, probably several lifetimes.
A few hundred maybe per minute. That's right, but we keep on keeping on, right? All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for calling. Thanks for listening. Good to hear your voice.
Good to hear you. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Okay. 816-301-6304. Yes.
Do you think there's a lesson with Jephthah and his making that vow about victory, that the first thing that greets him, I mean, that is it, you think that's a lesson in not being rash, even if you think it's spiritual?
Not in this context.
Really?
It could be. But the first thing he does is he has been an outcast. His mother is a harlot.
Right.
So he's denied by his brothers,
Right.
okay, his place as a leader. And yet they know it's the first sign of trouble. They call on Jephthah to come back and fight the battle. Okay, so he comes back on one condition, and that is that he be the leader.
Right.
All right, make me the chief. You know, up until this point, you know, even though I've been the best leader, you've cast me out. Okay, so that's the first thing. So now he is the leader, and he wants to show his total devotion. It's kind of like sacrificing Isaac, all right? It's like he wants to be so one-pointed and devoted that he is approaching his task with his whole being. And the daughter, it's not like having your daughter killed. It's like relinquishing it's his only daughter, his only connection to the world. Okay, that's what it's about for you. All right, that's what it's about for you. What it's about on a literal level, it sounds like a horrible story. All right, but it's not. It's this faculty of judgment that is so one-pointed that it involves, and also, of course, his mother was a harlot, so he sacrifices a virgin daughter. Right?
Wow, that connection just blows my mind. I can't even comprehend that.
You see, in those days, sacrifice was the way to be close to God. All right? Fire. Burned in the fire. Yeah, I don't much care for that story either. I never liked the story of Isaac. But it has meaning for us in a way that it wouldn't otherwise if you don't take the trouble to look up the names and the phrases and see that you understand, because every passage in the Bible has a meaning for us. Okay? 816-301-6304. I never know. I guess somebody is listening. Oh, here we go. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Eleanor. I'm also enjoying your class. Are you there?
Yes. I'm glad you called.
And as you and Chuck are talking about Jephthah and the harlot, let's look at that metaphysically. Metaphysically, the harlot in us represents those, I would say, messed up error thinking that we take advantage of and use and are being used. And Jephthah represents spiritual judgment. And so this is what you were talking about earlier about the pattern that is set up.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. I think what Chuck said earlier, and I kind of agree, it is, the whole thing is, your presentation is very good, but it's overwhelming. This is probably, this class tonight could probably be stretched out and gone into detail in probably 6 to 10 weeks.
Yes. In fact, I did do a 6-week class on the judges earlier, but I'm trying to, I was trying to synthesize it down to see how the faculty of judgment goes through an incredible journey of its own in trying to unite and work together with other faculties. And and it presumes a kind of understanding of how the faculties work and where they're located in the body and what they represent. I agree with you.
I'm a visual person, and I think, because I'm giving you an assignment, but
dang, go for it.
if we could put this in a chart, like Jim Gaither used to put things in charts. And have the judge what they represent and the faculties and so forth, and just highlight it, and just so we could have a full picture in our head. And that's what charts do. They give you a picture of the pattern and the movement that takes place in the judges.
Yes, I will do that. I love assignments.
The students giving the teacher.
You're a teacher too, and I love assignments. Yes, and I agree with you. I was struggling with this all day to see how much to include, but what if people haven't read the story and then they don't understand what, anyway.
Yeah.
No, it is a lot.
Yeah, the other thing is when you were doing the review, talking about crossing of the Jordan, and Chuck brought up the thing of putting the feet in the water. Of course, feet represent understanding.
Right.
So, and water are thoughts, right?
Absolutely. Well, water is cleansing in this case.
Okay.
Yeah. So the understanding is being cleansed when you step into the water. And the waters part when the priests get to that place where the consciousness is pure. They're carrying the ark with them.
Right.
And so by virtue of carrying the ark, their understanding is cleansed. And then the waters part and they go across. And then there's that circumcision at Gilgal. So again, purification before they go into Jericho. And so
you did it a couple times of drawing the analogy of crossing the Jordan, particularly going into the silence. And again, putting our feet, our understanding, spiritual understanding as we surrender to the power of the silence, which is God, which is all.
Yes, and many people do not realize that we're already whole, and the primary reason we go into the silence is to remove the blocks that are preventing that wholeness to come through. So the cleansing of the feet is extremely important, because that's exactly what happens. And so then they can just walk around those walls and carry their trumpets and weave an energy field around all those rigid beliefs that the walls represent, and the walls come tumbling down.
Could we equate that with the creative process, the 7 steps?
Yeah, because they walk around the walls 6 times. So that's that is the all the plans. This was the plan, the strategy, and then after 6 times, then the 7th day is the Sabbath, when the work actually gets done, and that is that's when the walls dissolve, because that release of power when you touch the silence dissolves, no matter how strong an obstacle is. And the Jericho was actually destroyed even before they came, because it was Rahab who told them that the people inside Jericho, they were really, really, really afraid of the God of Israel. So they were destroyed from the beginning And so knowing that, what dissolves fear? Just a little bit of faith. A little bit of faith dissolves great fear. And so walking around those walls and creating that energy field of protection, and nothing can stand up with that silence. And so the trumpets are the decree, if you will, or the affirmation of, and the shouts, all that.
What comes to me is not by power and might, is your strength.
Absolutely, but
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
not by power, not by might. Yes, good point. So, so Jericho, a beautiful story, and I think that it's just that ease with which it is. Once a person says, "Oh, it's easy to enter the silence," it requires no effort whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then the more you do it, the more you see, oh, there's a lot to be released. Okay, it's not just that it's a beautiful experience, it's that there's a lot of work that goes on in there in the Sabbath of our hearts, and all the subconscious things that have been hidden. So.
There was one other thing when it was getting late. I had a question. I have some notes here. With Barak, and I will accompany you in battle. And I can't read my notes.
Yeah. I will accompany. Yeah. Deborah.
But what came to me, because I'm reading Ernest Wilson's The Week That Changed the World, and doing his daily chapters and meditations on it, and Jesus is facing that whole thing of his crucifixion and knows what's before him, and I will accompany you in battle. Certainly, he experienced the battle.
Oh yes.
On a human level, what he had to deal with, but overcame that with putting things in perspective and reconnecting. I guess you could say the silence, because the silence is the holy union of God and man.
Yes. You're talking about the Garden of Gethsemane?
Right.
Yes. Right, and he realizes, that the human Jesus is saying, this doesn't look like something I want to go through.
Right.
Because he can't find his disciples are asleep,
Right.
And so what do you do when your faith falls asleep?
Right.
But then there's the realization that the connection is still there, and so it's the will that makes the decision. It's the will that says, I'm willing. If this be thy will, then let thy will be my will. And Barak used to, from the story, he had to agree to do this battle with the Canaanites without receiving any glory or even any credit for it.
Right. And of course, we do this in a sense. What I like and what I'm seeing is the bridge between the Old Testament and the New Testament, because as you go through these stories, especially when you do the analogies of the 12 powers in the tribes and so forth, it really draws the connection from the old to the new into one.
Exactly. And you can see that the faculties don't function so perfectly in the Old Testament. You know how, and Chuck was bringing up about Benjamin, the tribe of Benjamin was cursed.
Right.
And they're immature. That's how our faculties go. Sometimes our faith is like Peter. It wavers. Or like Abraham, or, and sometimes our strength is like Samson, that we use our strength to show our tricks in the world and how strong we are. But and so they're immature, and then they grow into the 12 disciples who aren't fully empowered until Pentecost. But it's a process, and that transition phase is probably the hardest phase, and this is where we get bogged down.
What was Benjamin's faculty?
Faith.
Faith.
And they keep on, the pattern keeps on repeating. That we stray away and then we have trouble. As soon as we are out of alignment with spiritual law, we find ourselves in a challenge, and then we pray, cry out to the Lord, and then have the realization that the Savior is within us.
Yeah, and sometimes we have in our own life a prophet that calls us on our stuff.
Exactly. Yes, how true, how true.
Yeah.
Well, so next week we're going to talk about David. Saul and David and the whole period of the kings and I know it's a lot to cover, but I've only scheduled 2 classes, and I'm mainly interested in correlating this with the phases where we are, so that we can better understand where we are in the whole scheme of things on the way to Christ.
I think with you, because I've taken most of your classes in the last couple of years, and I think it's good because you've done this before, but more in detail. But it's a good opportunity. The more we hear it, the more we grasp it and sinks in. It's like you're giving us a 32-ounce steak dinner, and we can only eat about 4 ounces, But when we come back to it, it kind of enriches. I remember George Lapsa and Rocco Errico, and Rocco used to take notes. He said, "No notes." He said, "You just listen," and he said, "If you forget, you ask me again."
Yes.
And so I have to get rid of the pen because
it's definitely mine as well. I used to take notes, so many notes that I'd miss actually the next sentence or something.
Right.
No, because it doesn't really get established in you until, and you have to read it many times and kind of absorb it, get an overview, and but I think it's very fun to just take a small piece and really go deeply into that as part of a process. So
you're planting the seed.
Yeah, planting the seed. Okay. So read about the kings next time. You'll find it in 1st and 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings, and 1st and 2nd Chronicles. Well, you don't have to read all that, but read something. And so thanks for calling. Thanks for watching.
Okay, thank you.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay. So, any more questions?
No, we're way over time.
Oh, we're way over. All right, so we'll just close our eyes for a moment and acknowledge that the task ahead is difficult, but we keep on keeping on as our faculty of strength is there to support and discipline, all of those other wandering faculties. We align ourselves in the silence with the spiritual law. And even though in our daily life we may stray, we know that we can return again and again to realign ourselves. God always gives us second chance, third chance, fourth chance, as many chances as we need. And for that awareness, we are grateful. And we say, Amen.
Amen.
So thank you all for watching, for listening.